I used to think protection meant a wall between you and the dark, a door you could lock, a place to hide until the danger passed. Then humanity arrived, and they turned the dark itself into a wall for us. They built homes inside it, they raised children there, and they never once asked us to say thank you. My name is Sirith Kolvan. I am a historian of the Velari people, and I am old now. Old enough to remember what the galaxy looked like before humans walked among the stars. Old enough to remember when my world burned. I am writing this record for the Galactic Archive because the younger generations have begun to forget. They walk through corridors that human hands built, they sleep under shields that human engineers designed, and they never stop to wonder why any of it exists. Forgetting is dangerous. Forgetting is how you lose everything twice. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not humanity's beginning, mine. I was born on Velara Prime, a world of crystal forests and resonance lakes that sang when the wind moved across them. My people are small. We glow faintly in the dark, bioluminescent patterns running along our skin like living art. We are poets and philosophers and musicians. We are not warriors. We have never been warriors. The idea of building a weapon felt as strange to us as the idea of setting fire to a painting. Why would anyone do such a thing? We were part of what the galaxy called the Concord of Gentle Races. 11 species, all peaceful, all vulnerable, all bound together by the shared belief that kindness was stronger than cruelty. The Drushan, who lived in vast ocean worlds and communicated through deep water song. The Palishi, whose hollow bones made them light as paper, but whose minds held mathematics the rest of us could barely imagine. And others. All gentle, all trusting, all wrong about how the universe worked. The Kethvor Dominion came for us on what we called the Night of Falling Light. They were an insectoid empire, massive and ancient, and they did not conquer worlds for resources or wealth. They conquered because conquest was their culture. Submission was their art. They dropped into our system with a fleet of 300 warships and burned our orbital stations in a single night. I remember standing in the garden behind my family's home, watching streaks of fire crawl across the sky, and not understanding what I was seeing. I was 9 years old. The Concord sent diplomats. We always sent diplomats. 12 of our finest negotiators boarded a shuttle and flew to the Kethvor flagship to discuss terms of peace. The Kethvor killed them on an open broadcast. They made every species in the Concord watch. The message was clear. There would be no discussion. There would only be obedience or death. My family fled on a refugee barge. It was designed for 2,000 passengers. There were 11,000 of us on board. I sat on my mother's lap in a corridor that smelled of engine oil and fear, and I watched Velara Prime grow smaller through a cracked viewport. The sky above my world had turned orange. Millions of my people were still down there. I never saw most of them again. We drifted. The Concord had no military to send, no safe harbor to offer. Every great power in the galaxy looked at us and saw an opportunity. The Thessari hegemony offered protection, but only if we surrendered our genetic material for their breeding programs. The Rock Collective said they would shelter us, but we would have to worship their machine god and abandon our own beliefs. Others simply turned us away. Refugees are inconvenient. Refugees are messy. Refugees make people uncomfortable, because they are living proof that the universe is not fair. Then, drifting at the edge of a system none of us had ever heard of, our long-range sensors picked up a signal. It was broadcast on outdated frequencies, clumsy and loud, like someone shouting across a crowded room. The species identified themselves as human. They came from a small rocky world orbiting a yellow star. They had achieved interstellar travel only 40 years before. They had a handful of colony worlds. They had no seat on any council. By every measure that mattered, they were nobody. Our convoy limped into their space expecting to be turned away again. We had practiced our begging by then. We knew how to make ourselves small, how to promise things we could not deliver, how to accept humiliation with grace. We were ready to do whatever it took. We did not have to do any of it. A human officer named Rear Admiral Josephine Mwangi met our convoy at the border of their territory. She did not ask us for contracts. She did not demand payment. She did not set conditions. She opened every port, every station, every colony world under her authority, and she said words I will carry with me until I die. She said, "You are frightened, you are hurt, and you are here. That is enough." I did not understand those words at the time. I was a child. I understood them later. I understand them now more deeply than almost anything else I have ever learned. She was saying that our suffering was our credential, that we did not need to prove we deserved help, that being in pain was reason enough. Human civilians organized shelters. They gave us food, and when they realized our biology could not process some of their meals, they reformulated everything within days. Their doctors studied our anatomy from scratch, working through the night to understand how to treat injuries they had never seen before. A human engineer knelt beside a Veilari girl whose translator had broken during the evacuation. He spent 3 hours fixing it by hand so she could tell her mother she was scared. Then he stood up, walked down the corridor, and entered a classified military briefing about the Kethvor fleet. That is the thing about humans that the galaxy still does not fully understand. Their compassion and their fury are not separate things. They are the same thing. The kindness they showed us was not despite their anger. It was because of it. Every refugee they fed made them angrier. Every child they comforted made them more determined. They looked at what had been done to us, and something inside them caught fire. Behind the shelters and the food lines and the medical tents, their military commanders were asking questions. Quiet questions. Focused questions. Who did this to you? How many ships do they have? Show us the star charts. Where are their supply lines? Where are their shipyards? Where do their leaders sleep? Within 3 standard weeks, the United Terran Defense Council issued a declaration to the entire galaxy. I have it memorized. Every Veilari of my generation has it memorized. It said, "The concord of gentle races is under the protection of humanity. Any act of aggression against its member species will be considered an act of war against Earth and all her territories. This is not negotiable." The galaxy laughed. The Thessari called it arrogant. The Rock called it foolish. The Kethvor laughed loudest of all. Humanity was small. Humanity was young. Humanity had no idea what they were challenging. They were right about one thing. Humanity had no idea, but not in the way the Kethvor thought. Everyone expected humans to build a defensive line and hide behind it, to protect their own borders and wait. That is what reasonable species do. Humans did not do that. They launched a counter-invasion. They attacked the Kethvor Dominion directly, pushing into enemy space with a fleet that was outnumbered and outgunned by nearly every measure. What the numbers did not show was something no chart or calculation could capture. Humans are creative in violence, the way my people are creative in song. It is their terrible gift. The Battle of the Ashenmaw Nebula was their first major engagement. 12 human destroyers against 40 Kethvor warships. Impossible odds. But humanity had arrived in that nebula weeks before the battle. They had seeded the entire gas cloud with mines, sensor drones, and signal disruptors. The Kethvor flew in expecting to crush a smaller force. Instead, they flew into a trap that had been built with patience, precision, and a kind of ruthless imagination that the galaxy had never seen. Humanity lost 5 ships. The Kethvor lost all 40. The Kethvor adapted. They were not stupid. They realized they could not beat humans in direct combat, so they changed strategies. They struck at human colony worlds, hoping to force the fleet to turn back and defend its own people. It was a logical move. Any species would prioritize its own survival. Humans did not turn back. Their civilians on the targeted colonies refused evacuation. I need you to understand what that means. Ordinary people, farmers and teachers and shopkeepers, picked up mining tools and welding torches and improvised weapons, and they held their ground. They fought in the streets of their own cities so that their fleet could keep pushing forward to save us. People who had never held a weapon in their lives chose to stand and fight so that strangers from another world could be free. I heard a transmission from a human colony called New Mombasa during the worst of the siege. A woman's voice, impossibly calm, broadcast on an open frequency so that everyone could hear. She said, "Tell the fleet not to turn around. We will hold. We always hold." In 11 months, humanity broke the Kethvor Dominion, not pushed them back, not negotiated a truce. Broke them. Their throne world was blockaded, their fleets were shattered, and their leaders were forced to sign an unconditional surrender in front of representatives from every Concord species they had terrorized. Humanity made them look us in the eye while they admitted defeat. But this is where most people stop telling the story. The war ended. The heroes won. Everyone lived happily. That is where they stop. They should not stop there. Because what happened next is the part that still makes me cry. Even now, even after all these years, humanity did not go home. They looked at the Concord races, at all 11 species, and they saw something that broke their hearts. They saw people who were gentle and kind and good, and who would always be targets because of it. They saw civilizations that could not fight, and should never have to fight. And instead of saying what every other powerful species in the galaxy would have said, instead of telling us to build armies and harden ourselves, and become more like them, they said something else entirely. They said, "Then we will make sure you never have to." They began building the bastions. I lack the words to describe what the bastions are, but I will try. They are fortress stations, yes, but calling them that is like calling an ocean a puddle. Each one is a megastructure positioned at a strategic choke point around Concord space. Each one is a military stronghold, a refugee shelter, a cultural archive, a medical center, and a shipyard, all woven together into something that feels less like a building and more like a promise made solid. Bastion Aurelian orbits my homeworld. It was the first one built, raised from nothing in the ashes of Velara's sky. It can house 20 million refugees. It can repel a full invasion fleet. It has libraries that hold copies of every Velari song ever written, so that even if our world burned again, our culture would survive. Bastion Tidewall guards the Droon ocean worlds, and it was designed to operate entirely underwater if necessary. Bastion Hearthlight sits deep in Palishi space, with climate systems so carefully calibrated to Palishi biology that children born there grow up thinking it is a natural world. There are dozens more, across the stars, in every direction. Wherever the gentle races live, humanity built a fortress to guard them. The galaxy did not know what to make of it. The Thessari hegemony protested, calling it imperial overreach. The Rock Collective accused humanity of building an empire in disguise. Even some Concord leaders worried quietly that we were trading one master for another. But humanity did not govern us. They did not tax us. They did not set our laws or choose our leaders. The bastions were gifts, staffed by human volunteers who learned our languages, ate our food, celebrated our holidays, and raised their children alongside ours. They asked for nothing. When the Thessari ambassador demanded to know what humanity wanted in return for all of this, the human representative, a woman named Director Adeze Okonkwo, gave an answer that has been repeated across 1,000 worlds. She said, "We want to sleep at night." That was it. That was the price. Humanity built fortresses across the stars because the thought of not doing it kept them awake. I am old now. I walk the corridors of Bastion Aurelian slowly, and I see things that would have seemed impossible when I was that frightened child on the refugee barge. I see human soldiers sitting cross-legged on the floor, playing a Velari singing game with children who glow like little lanterns. I see a memorial wall with the names of every human who died in the Kethfor War, and beside each name, a small note that reads volunteer. Every single one of them chose to be there. Nobody forced them. Nobody ordered them. They came because they looked at strangers suffering in the dark and decided that was not acceptable. Last week, a young Velari student stopped me in the corridor. She was born on this station. She has never known a galaxy without bastions, without human guardians, without safety. She asked me a question that I have heard many times, but it still strikes me like a blow every time I hear it. She said, "Why do the humans stay? The war ended decades ago." I looked at her for a long moment, this child who had never been afraid, who had never watched her sky turn orange, who had never begged for shelter and been refused. And I told her the truth. Because humans do not protect you by standing between you and the dark. They plant themselves in the dark and refuse to move. And then, because they are human, they build something beautiful there, so that you never have to be afraid of the dark again. She nodded, but I do not think she understood. Not yet. Maybe one day she will. Maybe one day she will realize that the walls around her are not made of metal and energy shields. They are made of choices. 1,000,000 small, stubborn, impossibly generous choices, made by people who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I am submitting this record to the Galactic Archive today. I have marked it under the historical category that I believe fits best, though the archivists may disagree. I have filed it under acts of unexplained compassion. I do not think it is unexplained at all. I think it is the most human thing in the universe. But then again, that is the point.